Welcome to this episode of Tech Threads. I'm your host, Max Watson, and today I'm talking with Taylor Heyman, who is a principal operations engineer at Domo. Taylor, welcome back to Tech Threads. It's fun to have you back on for a second time so we can finish up what we talked about last time.
Good to be back. Yeah, I'm excited about our topic of conversation today. It should be good. So thanks for
Yeah,
having me back on.
yeah. For those who are joining this time, we had Taylor on the podcast, I think it was a month or two ago, before summer started, and we talked about a lot of like data analytics stuff, but we wanted to also hit this subject of like PM engineering data hybrid. That's kind of like the future. There's a lot of articles, people out there talking about it, kind of with AI pushing things along. This is what the future could look like. So we're going to talk about that today. Before we jump into it, Taylor, could you kind of give like an overview of who you are for those who might not have listened last time?
Yeah, so hey, I'm Taylor. I am a principal operations engineer at Domo, which is a hybrid role of product management and data and analytics engineering, which is why I'm excited to talk about what the future of product management looks like and what that hybrid may be like. I've been doing product and data for almost 10 years, a little less. So I'm getting older, but yeah, we'll dive more into what that all means throughout the conversation. But that's me. Good to be here.
Yeah, could you start out maybe by explaining what this like shift is for those who maybe might not have heard about it or been kind of keeping up with it?
Yeah, so there's been this shift in the past couple years, right, around honestly around everything. And as part of it, where there's been a bunch of layoffs and there's been a bunch of change in macroeconomics and just a bunch of changes everywhere. I think product management is kind of big in that conversation about getting a second look and talking about, okay, like what does the future of product management look like? What do we expect from product managers? What role do they play in the organization? How do they contribute and whatnot? And so that's kind of like in the short, what this shift is along with many other roles, product management is getting another second look, and a lot of people, myself included, tend to think that product management may be shifting a bit to align with today's expectations.
Yeah. And I was even reading before we jumped on this podcast some articles that people just all over the internet have been posting about this kind of shift, this hybrid role. And it seems like seems to be like one of the big factors in it. Now that you can kind of touch more data faster, touch coding a little bit easier, more PMs are kind of expected or wanting to get more into the engineering side to understand that role. But could you kind of explain like why this shift's coming and kind of what some of the factors that are?
Yeah, so I'll give my perspective on that. I think AI definitely plays a part in it, but I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I think it's a kind of a cherry on top. So I've been reading into and thinking about this, and again, this is my perspective, and I think it makes sense. So I'll do a quick history lesson to take you down the rabbit hole that I went through to think about all this. So for me, like this whole shift starts all the way back in like 2008 when the housing market crashed in the US, which led to like the global financial crisis. Because when that all happened, which that was a very deep rabbit hole I went down. If you haven't like researched and read about what happened there, do it because it's super interesting. Um, but when that happened, that kind of led in response to the economic crisis and the housing market crash and everything, the introduction of the ZIRP or the zero interest rate policy that was implemented to kind of help the economy. And I think that's what led to a lot of what happened in the 2010s, which is we see like tech companies really and startups and just a lot of companies in general shift to that growth at all costs mindset. That was really because of this zero interest rate policy, which basically means it was really cheap and easy to get money. Banks were trading money and you could, borrow money and stuff at really low rates. And so it was a lot less risky for companies to just be like, hey, we don't really care about profitability because we can always go get more cash if we need to. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to explode our business and get as much, as many users and adoption and everything that we can, even if we have to burn through all of our cash because we can always go get more money, which led to this explosion of these tech roles, including product management. And so On a personal note, that always felt kind of weird to me of like I joined some startups and one startup when I joined and I was talking to the founder and I was like, "Hey, tell me about profitability in the company." He was like, "Oh, not even on the radar." And I was like, "Okay." He was like, we're just looking to grow this thing as much as we can and then we'll just, get acquired or IPO or sell it or whatever. And then, we'll benefit from that and make off like bandits. And that felt kind of weird to me at the time, and it still feels weird to me now. And I joined the company anyways. But it was kind of because of that zero interest rate policy that we saw through the 2010s. That went away briefly. COVID happens. They reintroduce the zero interest rate policy because of COVID and how crazy everything was there. But then in March 2022 about is when like ZERP kind of officially ended and they started to hike up the rates of borrowing and loaning money. And so where I did a deep dive is seeing that like, hey, okay, at that time, the money is what like drives what everybody's doing and how everybody's operating, right? So during this growth at all cost phase, it was worth the risk for people to loan money to startups and back them up and everything because, it didn't cost them anything and all they needed to do was find one that exploded to be a unicorn and they'd get, 10x their returns or whatever. But when that shift started in March of 2022, and they kind of started raising rates and money wasn't as cheap anymore, you can kind of see that it correlates with what we've started to see in the last couple of years, where that's when the layoffs started happening. That's when like things started getting crazy and things were up and down and all around. And that's what I believe is really at the root of like what's this shift and what's happening. Because in March of 2022 is when these like things really started, these layoffs started happening. And then in November of 2022 was something interesting. That's when Elon Musk, love him or hate him, took over Twitter and cut half of the company and just like slashed it and it was pretty brutal and public. But I think my personal belief was that that was kind of a eye-opening moment for many companies who are in this panicky moment of like, okay, we're no longer growth at all costs. Profitability actually matters. How are we going to reach profitability? Well, 99% of the time, your biggest item on your like balance sheet is payroll for human capital and what you're paying your people. So for these companies to see Elon Musk slash Twitter in half, it's still functioning fine. To them, it was like, well, we were thinking about this. He did it anyways. And so like, why not us? Personal belief, that's speculation, but that's kind of how I see it. And so I think that's what's really driven this like, okay, profitability. People are expensive and people create layers and complication in companies. And then at the same moment in like November of 2022 was when ChatGPT like was released and exploded. And so I work with a VP who I have to say, I have to give this message at work all the time that like AI is super powerful and you can do amazing things with it, but it's not a silver bullet. But my VP that I report to, he always says, he's like, hey, I'm in charge of like, we've switched from growth at all costs to we need to do more with less. And he always says AI is a godsend because he's like, at first I was freaking out of like, how are we going to do more with less? Well, that's where AI comes into play, and like hopefully it can boost our productivity and efficiency. But I think that really, this end of the ZERP era, do more with less, is what's really driving this change. And AI is just a tool that's kind of like, I think, driving people to be like, maybe this is really possible and we can really make this happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because it is, I'm sure it was eye-opening for those companies to see how, because Twitter, I feel like for me when I use it, it hasn't really changed much. You can't really tell that they lost or like cut their workforce in half just because it looks the same. It's producing the same, it's doing kind of the same thing. So I can see how that totally could correlate to like them and most companies in the tech market want to consolidate and kind of maybe combine roles, like kind of what we've been talking about with this like product management slash engineering, just to kind of like what you've been saying, like do more with less.
Yeah, and again, this is all speculation. This is my own perspective. And I think it's that shift of, okay, money is expensive. We can't just go get more money when we need it. So we need to do more with less. And how the heck are we going to do that? And the hype of AI and everything is just like opening people's eyes and giving them a glimpse of hope of, okay, maybe there is a way that we can do this. But yeah, I mean, besides the political and ethical changes that may have happened at Twitter, like the platform itself did not burn and die and everything just shut down. It still ran. And so I think it's been a perfect storm, and all of these things together I think are just really getting people to take a second look and be like, okay, what are the functions we have in our company? What value are they bringing? Do we need to shift that to make it make sense?
Yeah, and I know you've talked about how you right now in your role at Domo, you're kind of in that role where you're a product, you own products, but you're also data and technical. How did you do it, and how can you see people in the future maybe positioning themselves better for that kind of role?
Yeah, so I do believe that, as we're examining this shift specifically with product management, I do believe that there will be a pretty big shift in product management. So I'll give you my quick story of how it happened for me first. I got super lucky that from the beginning of my career, I always kind of market myself or brand myself, excuse me, as a data product and operations guy. And I was lucky that at the beginning of my career, from the start, I was put in positions where I had great opportunities to grow and progress in all three of those areas at once. As I mentioned, I've worked for a number of startups, and in startups you wear lots of hats, and I've worn all three of those hats at the same time throughout my whole career. And so I actually was talking with a buddy of mine one time, and it was when I was kind of trying to figure out the shift of, okay, I've held an official product management title throughout my whole career. I've always done data engineering and operations. Do I want to keep doing product management? Do I want to try data engineering, as a full-time titled role? Do I want to do operations? And I was talking to him, and this was at the time that I had been in a data engineering role for a little bit. And he made the comment, he's like, yeah, well, you've only been a data engineer for like a year or so. And I said, yeah, by title. I said, but that's not really true. And I think one thing that was unique about me and has put me in a really unique position to be able to feel like I'm on top and at the front of this shift and this wave is I told him then and there, I was like, hey man, like I can create three senior plus level resumes for a senior product manager, a senior data engineer, and or a senior operations person expert. And it's true. So I'll give you the quick rundown. I'll talk through three of my jobs really quick. So I worked for a restaurant software startup. On the product side, I was the head of product, and I owned a portfolio of about like a dozen products that were adopted. We started with about 5 to 6 restaurant locations, and by the end we had grown to over 150. And I led all product development through that as the head of product and as a product manager. At the same time, I played the role of data engineer where any like analysis, reporting, data stuff went through me. I was creating the data modeling for our different products. So like our gift card reconciliation, our accounting integrations, our menu management, our loyalty programs, like I did all the data modeling, and I was leading huge data migration projects. As people needed to migrate from our old menu management to our new menu management, I was the engineer that did that and migrated everybody over. And then the nature of the business, we were building software for restaurant operations. And so my mindset was just there, and I was solving operations problems, working with the restaurants. Moving on to the next one, worked for a fintech company as a product manager. I owned their lead distribution platform, which was a software engineering or software program, and we led and developed that as a product manager. I realized that software was not working for our problem, and so I personally turned it into a data pipeline and a data engineering platform. And so again, hands on keyboard, I like built the scripts and the whole thing. and product engineering, and then again, nature of business. I was working with our sales and operations teams, and so I was just operationally minded like that. And then last but not least, I joined another type of fintech. It was like a healthcare fintech. I won't get into the details, but same thing, product manager. I was owning the integrations and third-party software that they were using for their sales and operations. I built their analytics semantic layers and working, with the teams, I was solving this problem. So like legitimately, I got lucky and I was able to build three resumes at once. Which today, like I said, I made this switch from product manager. I switched to for a little while to a full-time data engineering role. And then most recently, I got lucky and found this role with the title of principal operations engineer, where I was hired to own an internal tool for account management that covers all of our client services teams. So customer success, support, education, consulting, all of those. And I'm the product manager for it. I'm working with stakeholders, identifying the problems to solve and coming up with solutions. And then I'm the engineer that I go and build it. And so I got super lucky that I'm in this position, but I feel because of this balance and these different skill sets that I have, I'm able to bring all those together and be at the front of this wave and say, hey, I am a high level product manager, data engineer, and operations expert, and I can fulfill all those roles, and I can help you do more with less. I'm basically a three-man team in in one. And I really love that and enjoy it. And I'm lucky to have found a position that recognizes me for that, and I'm happy with it where I'm at.
Yeah, it seems like literally your whole career like led up to this. Like you've done every part because there's articles I was reading today and it's that you have like the data side, you have the product side, then you have like the engineering side. And I guess the idea is like you can be a basic generalist in all three, but you have to have like one that is like your expertise. That's kind of like your niche that you add into it. It seems like you just kind of did all three separately or at the same time and then just like, yep, I got all three, which is super awesome. For those who might not like have that luck to be able to develop all of those skills like simultaneously at the same time. What do you think they can do, maybe like in a bigger corporate setting like what you're in right now, to kind of get real like hands-on experience building those different skills? Do you have any advice or anything that you think that they could possibly do to kind of develop those other sides?
Yeah, so I've actually been talking with a couple of people about that. There's been a couple of people that have kind of agreed with my perspective of, hey, the future of product management is not going to look the same. And really quick, maybe just to paint a little picture of what that may look like or what I believe that may look like. Today, the typical product organization has a product trio, right? And it's a triangle. You have your product manager, you have your designer, you have your engineer, or leads at least. And I believe that it'll kind of go from a triangle and become more of like a Venn diagram
Mm.
where, you got to do more with less. And so just a pure product manager who's just middle management, facilitation, glue, but can't really like talk the talk on the tech or design side, can't really contribute in that way. I don't think product management is dead. I don't think product managers are going away. But I think because of the expectation to do more with less, I think because of the tools we'll have with AI and the accessibility, anybody now can like go write some code, can go mock up a wireframe or a prototype. I think the expectations will be so much higher. I think because budgets are tighter, there will be less hiring ability for product management roles. And so I think there will be, I talked with Braden, our master UPG leader. Shout out Braden. And he said something I really liked of he's like, yeah, I think there will be like these product management archetypes where you'll have still true product managers, but they'll be far and few between because of the expectations and the accountability and responsibility of that. The scope of what they cover will be so much larger. No longer will we have you're the product manager of the like button at Facebook, but it's going to be like more like a general manager, a GM type role than a project manager type role.
Mhm.
And then maybe you'll have those archetypes where it's like you're the PM engineer hybrid or the PM design hybrid, that type of stuff. And so for me, as I've talked to a few people that have been interested in my career path and kind of thinking the same way I am and are like, oh, I want to get ahead of this, there's been three things that I've talked through with them. One is you probably need to decide. I think the expectation moving forward will be you either need to be the best pure product manager that exists, otherwise you're not going to get a pure product management role, or you better be a PM engineer, PM design hybrid. And so my suggestion is you should figure out what you want that balance to be. If you want pure product management and you don't want to do engineering and design, you better figure out what's going to separate you from the pack because, like I said, those roles are going to be so much less and the expectations are going to be so much higher that you're really going to have to work hard to separate yourself from the pack. So if you're like 100% PM, you got to figure out what you're going to do. Or, if you want it to be like 2080 engineering, PM, maybe you can find a role that's more like a technical product manager, or, same thing on the design side. Or if you want that flipped and maybe you're like, actually, I'm interested in engineering and I want to do 80% engineering with 20% PM, then you got to start getting those skills and building those skills up. And so what I found though is interesting is so one, figure out what you want that balance to be. Two, depending on what that balance is, then you need to go and like develop those skills. And then the third thing that's been super interesting as I've been talking with these people and saying like, what should I do to move forward? I've recommended studying the engineering career path, specifically from like the main companies, the big top five, six, whatever it is. They've been doing it so long and they have those career paths so well defined that it was really insightful for me to understand how can I progress in my career? Because especially if you want to go on these, maybe one of these more hybrid roles to keep propelling yourself forward, what was interesting is, for example, like on the engineering career path, a junior to senior level engineer is like a task taker, and here's a well-defined task, and you take it, and or maybe a less defined task, you take it, you knock it out, and we can trust you to do that. But the senior level is what they call the terminal level, which means like in terms of technical ability, that's as technical as they expect you to be. And anything past that is a bonus. But if you can't or don't progress to senior, then you're in trouble and they're probably going to let you go. But you can be a senior engineer and just cruise there the rest of your life and you're totally fine. The interesting thing is what separates a senior, or sorry, let me say it the other way. What separates a staff and principal engineer, those next levels, from the rest is not their more technical abilities naturally because those people are good, they become more technical. But what really elevates you to the next level in these hybrid roles or these engineer paths is your product management skills. It's not, are you a top 1% programmer in the world, but it's, can you identify the problems that really matter? Can you identify solutions that actually work and will get adopted? Can you work with stakeholders and get buy-in? Can we put you in a room with non-technical people and not be worried about you drowning them in technical details and stuff they don't understand and that type of stuff? So that's one of the things that pushed me so hard down this path is as I was exploring and I was like, I really like engineering. I really like product management. How can I find a good balance of both? I found and I saw, I was like, oh, if I can get my technical skills up to a good enough level, which again, by the luck of my career, I was already there. I was like, then I can get my product management skills recognized as well. And I can probably find myself a role where I have that balance of they trust me as a product manager and they trust me on the engineering skills as well. And I can find what I like and what I like to do and what I'm good at doing. And so that was super eye-opening to me to study that career path from like Mang and they've honestly like gamified the system now. There's people that make careers off of like helping people get interviews and get in and progress and all that stuff. And I think no matter if you want to do pure product management or any of these hybrid roles, like study that career progression because I think it'll open up a path for you to figure out how you want to go forward.
100%. I mean, you can't get anywhere unless you know where exactly you want to go. And it is interesting to hear kind of about these like different, like career, like you can be a product manager, but also kind of branch off different, how expertise you want to go. into these different sides of product management and just like product design. Um, as we kind of wrap up, do you have any last like advice or things that you think it'd be beneficial for product managers to know as they're kind of making this transition from solely PM to maybe branching out and being more engineering minded or design minded?
Yes, I'll add one more thing that I'm realizing I forgot to add in that last list. The actual number three that I was thinking of is um, I think it's really important to also figure out your desires and passions and niche down. Um, like I said, for me, my niche was specifically data engineering and operations. There's so many different types of engineering roles. You can do front end, back end, you can do data engineering, you can do like network engineering, security, like all this different stuff. Same thing on the design side. You can do all sorts of different like industries and verticals and horizontals and all that stuff. And I think it's important to really try and focus yourself in and find that niche of what you want to work with. And then if you could find that extra niche, like I said, for me, it was operations. Maybe you really like finance. Maybe you really like marketing. Maybe you really like whatever product and engine, whatever it is. Um, think of what that niche is, because otherwise I think you'll probably get a little overwhelmed and feel maybe a little helpless or hopeless. And that I don't want anybody to feel like that. The last thing I'll say is like I said, I believe that this shift really will happen. And I think that like the sexy job of the 2020s or 2030s or whatever are going to be these hybrid roles, the people with the most impact and the best pay. And I think these roles will really start opening up. And so it's possible to do it. Even if you're starting now, it's never too late. There's so many free materials. AI, again, will be a huge help to help you build these skills. And don't be overwhelmed, and you can do it. You can make that transition. And so as always, I'll make myself available to anybody that's thinking about it or has questions. Like don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to talk you through it and share more about how I did it and help you through that.
100%. And I think we're already seeing that shift. We're already seeing more roles. And I'm sure a lot of product managers out there can kind of attest to it, how much they're using AI for prototyping and kind of touching more code and like committing more code to the actual code base with AI to kind of get in touch with that. But Taylor, thanks again for hopping on. I'm sure we'll have another episode in the future about something similar to this or data, but I appreciate you sharing your insights. I know a lot of people want to hear about this. I know people in the Slack community, the UPG community have already been messaging and kind of posting in channels about this and asking it. I actually saw one last week, so I was like, awesome, we nailed it on the timing side of this. But I really hope they like, and I know they will gain something from this, or at least a little bit more insight in kind of what it looks like, what their next steps are, and how they can kind of become more of this hybrid role. But yeah, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate you having me.